Welcome to our second IPD lecture on web development with Python and web2py. Let's start by looking at the folder structure of web2py. I'm assuming you have downloaded the source version, and we're going to look into the web2py folder which comes with the source version after you unzip it. So there are very few files in here and a few folders. The most important file is web2py.py. This is the one that you call to start the Rocket web server. There is a folder called applications. This one contains the applications you create and the applications that come with web2py. So we can look under here. So each subfolder is its own application. Let's look at welcome, since any application has the same structure as welcome. So if we cd under welcome, we find the internal structure of any web2py application. We find the controllers, the models, the views, the static files. There are a few other folders that we're going to examine in a minute. But let's look at the models. And under the models we find the db.py and the menu.py plus the other models you may have created. And if we look at controllers, we find the default py, which contains the action for index, the action for user, so login, authentication, registration. And we also find a admin.py. This controller is used for the web-based database administration tool. And then we find the views. So for every controller there is a subfolder, in this case default, and for every action there is a file. In this case, for the action index there is a default/index.html. For the user action there is default user.html. At top level under views there are other HTML or other views which are used to render actions using different formats, not just HTML, but for example JSON or PDF or RSS or Google Maps or ICS calendars, and we're going to talk about those in a second. But the general idea is you call, you type a URL, the URL is mapped into a function call which calls an action. The action may return a string, in this case the string is returned to the user, or it may return a dictionary. In that case the dictionary needs to be rendered by a view. If a view is not found, then web2py picks one of the generic views that matches the same extension as the requested URL. Something else we find here is the layout HTML. So usually our views, for example, if we look at index.html and we open it, we find that index.html, as most views, just extend the layout HTML. What that means is that the view gets embedded into layout HTML, and it gets embedded in a place which is marked into the extended view by include. So you call the action index, index returns a dictionary, web2py locates index.html, index.html extends layout HTML, so layout HTML is loaded, and index.html replaces this include statement, and then the view is rendered with the data returned by the action. There is something else here which is web2py Ajax HTML. So what we will find if we look into layout HTML is that at some point we include web2py Ajax. Here we go. So one view can extend another view, which means it's going to replace a piece of the extended view, but can also include another view by loading that view and replacing an include statement in the view itself. We can look what's inside web2py Ajax HTML, and what it does, basically it stores variables into this response files list, and it stores those JavaScript and CSS files which are required by web2py. And also it calls these two functions, include meta and include files, that when included in layout are going to write in here the include statements and the scripts that are necessary by layout in order to work. So let's see what else is in the file structure here. So we are still looking into the welcome application. There are other important folders in here. One is databases. So this folder contains the SQLite database used by the welcome action. And unless you point your web2py application to a different database, this is the one you will be using. Storage SQLite is the file that contains the actual database. SQL logs contains all the create statement and alter table statement, contains a log of those statements. And then there are .table files. So for every table there is a .table file. They contain metadata about the table creation. So when a table is created, this metadata is also stored so that if you go and change the field content of a table, so if you change the DB defined table content, web2py is able to look into this table file, look into the metadata, figure out if the table has changed, and figure out what kind of alter table is necessary in order to migrate the table. If an alter table is performed, it's communicated to the database, and then it's logged into SQL log. So we can actually look into SQL log here. And let's open it with, sorry, wrong folder, open with Emacs. Here we go. So you'll see in here that table was created and so on. In this case, there is no alter table, but there could have been. Okay, in cron, there is a cron tab and a cron tab example, which you can use to set cron jobs. These are not operating system cron jobs. These are web2py cron jobs, which are portable and runs on Windows as well, even if web2py now is a scheduler, so we don't really recommend using it. We recommend using the scheduler instead. Errors. So every time there is an error in a web2py page, you've seen that the error is logged and the ticket is issued. And by default, an error is logged into a file, into the errors folder. Languages. This contains language files. So let's look at one of them. Let's look at IT. So what they are, these are just Python files that contain a large dictionary in which a string in one language is mapped into a string in another language. So in this case, we're looking at it.py, so we're looking at translation of English, or the default language used by the application, which typically is English, into the Italian language. Now you should not really edit this file yourself, even if you can. This file should be edited through the administrative interface. If you were to edit this file yourself, be aware that you should be use ASCII strings with Unicode characters in there, with UTF-8 characters in there, but not Unicode. So you should not cut and paste Unicode characters in here. You should escape them to UTF-8. Then we have modules. So this folder contains any Python module that you want to ship with your application. So if in your application you do import x.py, it will look for x.py into the modules folder. Private, there usually is nothing under private, but this is where you would put files that are supposed to be private of the application, which means the application can access it, but they're not meant to be exposed to the user. So you want to isolate those files. An example would be keys to access third-party services. So if you want to store your Google password, or if you want to store your Generain key or your Dropbox key, you would put them in files and put these files into the private folder. There may be other files that you need to access that you consider private. The application needs to access, but they should not be exposed to the users. And then you would put it in there. Sessions. So every time a user accesses your application, a new session file is created, and the session file is a pickle file that contains the session object. And this is where you normally find the sessions, unless you tell web2py to store sessions in database or in some kind of other cache storage. Static files is the most intuitive one, so all the files that are supposed to be sent to the user without any modification, without any interaction with web2py, they are static files. So this includes typically images that go into the web pages, CSS files, and here we see that by default welcome comes with the bootstrap style, and also with there is a JavaScript calendar, and the JavaScript calendar has its own CSS. There are other JavaScript files that ship with web2py welcome. This includes jQuery.js. This includes web2py bootstrap, as well as a web2py bootstrap CSS. What these are customization on top of bootstrap to make sure they work well with web2py menus and with web2py, other web2py libraries. Then there is a web2py JS, which basically defines additional functions which may be required by web2py, like functions to perform AJAX, functions to validate fields, and other functions to embed components into wikis, for example. We'll look at that. There is a modernizer JavaScript. This makes sure that some of the JavaScript in the other libraries work well with older browsers like Internet Explorer. There are also standard error files. I can open one of these. And what these are files that you can customize, and they will be used in case there is a corresponding error. Like if there is a 404 error in your application, you can tell your application to look into the 404 HTML file and return this file to the user. You can create more to handle different types of errors. So this is basically the structure of all the web2py applications, and it's very similar whether you look at welcome, you look at examples, or you look at Part2, which we created the last time. There are sometimes other files in here. So after you actually start working on an application, you should write a license about this application, and you should write something about that application. This is also done via the administrative interface, but you can also edit the files yourself. There is a progress log where progress log contains a log of changes you make to your application. So every time you edit your application using the web-based IDE, web2py logs when the edit was made and how many lines were added or removed. This is used to monitor, for example, students who may be using web2py, and you want to check when they did the work. There's also a routes example.py. You can reroute URLs in web2py, so you can map URLs into function calls in a different way than the default mapping, and you can do this at the global level, or you can do this at the application level, and routes example.py tells you how you do it at the application level. And again, we find admin, again, same structure. There's one more thing into admin, which is a setting CFG file, and there are certain settings related to the web-based editor, like the color you choose, they are stored into that file. Okay, so let's get out of the applications folder. So these are your applications. Where is actually web2py? Well, web2py is here, it's in Gluon. This is what it actually is. These are Python modules, and this is the core of web2py. So we can review what some of these modules are. I'm not going to go in alphabetical order, but in importance order. The PYC files are the bytecode compiled files. Actually, I'm going to remove them because we don't really need them at this point. we go. So I've removed them. So let's look what's left. Okay, so we have Rocket. This is the web server, and it's a WSGI compliant web server, SSL enabled and multi-threaded. You can use Rocket with other web frameworks which are not web2py, or with your own WSGI application without web2py. It does not depend on anything else in here. Template implements the web2py template language. It also can be used with other frameworks to replace other frameworks' template language, or you can make your own WSGI application and use it as favorite template language. If you look into Part2, you will find one function at the bottom, which is the most important one, which is called render. So from template you import render, and you can pass content, so the actual text inside the template, or a stream from which to read the template, or a file name, again from which to read the template. The path where the template is located, that's necessary because your template may include or extend other templates, and web2py needs to know where to look for them. Context is a dictionary of variables you want to pass to the template. So when you call an action and it returns a dictionary, what web2py does, it imports this render function. It locates the corresponding view, and it loads the view into the content, and then passes the dictionary returned by the action into the content. There are some optional parameters that can be specified, like you can change the delimiters, but this is an advanced topic, it's not really important. What else do we have here? Storage implements a storage object. It's very much like a Python dictionary, except that the items can be accessed as attributes. So instead of doing, let's see, let's type somewhere here. Instead of doing if S is a dictionary, I access an element with key equal value. If you have a storage object, which you would get from storage, import storage, and storage is under the gluon folder as we're seeing. Then you can do both s_key equal value, or you can do s.key equal value. We have SQL.py is here just for backward compatibility. We don't actually use it. It's a proxy for DePaul. So DePaul is the database abstraction layer. The entire database abstraction layer is implemented in this one file. It's 428 kilobytes long, is one of the biggest files in here. And also DePaul does not depend on anything else inside web2py, so you can use the web2py database abstraction layer with other frameworks or with your own Python program. Even if it's not a web application, you can just use the database abstraction layer. All you need to do is from gluon-dal import, you need to import two things. You need to import the dal, you need to import field, and then in your own application you can do define table, and you can do db table field, and so on. Let's look what else is in here. So admin provides a Python implementation of those functions that you normally perform through the web-based IDE, like import an application, delete an application, create a copy of welcome. So for each one of them, there is a function in admin which you can access programmatically. And this one actually depends on other web2py files. So yeah, app cleanup, which application you need the request object to do this. More or less they're all self-documented. So there is a function, for example, to upgrade web2py. So you can call it, it will upgrade web2py. We'll connect to our service and get the latest version. create missing folders. If sometimes you run an application, some folders are supposed to be there but are not, this function will create it. This is called automatically inside, so you don't really need to call these functions ever, but in case you want to look for them, this is where they are. Cache implements the cache RAM and cache disk objects, which we use for caching in web2py. They are useful, we'll discuss them at some point, but we also encourage that you use proper server-based caching like Redis. CFS is also for caching, but this is used only internally. Compile up is only used internally. What it does, it performs compilation of the web2py controller and models. Content type, this is just a list of content types supported by web2py and maps an extension into the proper content type. So we keep this updated as new content type come up, and sometimes it's useful to look up, given extension, what content type should be served. This is accessed automatically in web2py, so unless you want to override it, you don't need to ever call it. Custom import. So web2py redefines the meaning of import, mostly because if an application executes an import statement like import X, we first want to look for X into the modules folder of the application that is requesting it, and then we want to look into the normal sys path. So this is done through a custom importer, which is defined here, and it replaces the normal importer of Python. File utils, these are again administration utilities that mostly have to do with files, like list all the files of a certain type, those kind of things. Globals define three objects, defines the classes for the request object, the response object, and the session object, sets the defaults and their methods, like the methods of session, like session connect. Highlight does not depend on any other web2py library. It implements a syntax highlighter for the Python language, for the web2py template language, for C, C++, and Java, and similar languages. HTML.py implements the web2py helpers. We've not seen them yet. We're going to talk later about web2py helpers. But if you briefly peeked into this file, we find that it defines a collection of objects that have the same names as HTML tags. So A, B, body, BR, button, center, and there are a few extra ones that don't exactly correspond to HTML tags, but generate HTML. So we're going to see what they are. So this is where all the helpers are defined. HTTP is a very web2py specific module. It defines exceptions, HTTP level exceptions, like your application at some point may raise an HTTP exception which redirects the user to another page. The redirect function, for example, is defined in here. Import all. This is a very interesting module which is really never used in web2py. What this does, this imports every Python module you can think of. It just never imported. This is never executed. The only reason it's there is to trick our build script, so that the build script thinks that modules which are not used by any of the current applications are actually used. In that way, all modules that ship with Python will also ship with the Windows and Mac distributions of web2py. So when you get a Windows distribution of web2py and later you install an application that requires a Python module, that Python module will be there even if the Python module was not required at the time the binary distribution was created. So this is just a trick file, it's never imported anywhere. Languages. This implements all the web2py internationalization stuff, plus the pluralization library. which basically knows how to pluralize words in different languages or where to look for the pluralization. This is very web2py specific. You can only use it with web2py really. Main is the entry point of web2py. When you call web2py.py, the first thing it does, it imports main, and inside main, let's look at it. Inside main, it locates WSGI base. So WSGI base is the WSGI application, is where web2py starts. So every HTTP request arrives to the web server calls this WSGI application, which does few things. We can just go briefly over it. It creates those variables that we always need, like request, response, and session. And it goes through and it deals with the cache. It performs various types of validation of the client, figures out if it's running locally or not. It sets up some variables into the request object, like what's the request folder, the request client, is this an AJAX request, is this a local request, is this an HTTP request. So this all goes into request.client, request.folder, request.ajax, request.isLocal, request.isHTTPS. Request.cid is used to identify if we're loading a component, and every component has a CID, as a component ID. We'll talk about components. Then we locate which application is actually being requested, and we figure out if the application is available or it's disabled, and if disabled, we redirect the user to an error page. Otherwise, we create any folder in the application may be missing, and we load the cookies, and we load the session, and we may do some debugging, that's optional, and eventually we serve the controller. So serve the controller is defined also in this file and eventually calls functions in compile up, and we pass the request, response, the session. These are the variables that we always pass around. And serve controller will actually locate, execute the content of the controller, will call the template, will generate the text that is finally returned to the user. There are various types of exceptions that we deal with. One exception is the HTTP exception. So when we redirect to another page, we're actually raising an HTTP exception. So HTTP exceptions are not interpreted as something bad happened, but they're just control flow statements. We raise an HTTP exception to tell something to the client. So we raise an HTTP exception all the times, even in case of success. When we actually have content we want to return to the client, what we do is we raise an HTTP exception. So if this is a static file, just give back the static file. Otherwise, then if there is a request body, make sure you close it. And if it's not a static file, then it means we have executed an action, we are returning data to the action. So we close any database that we may have opened. We try store it in the database. We try store the session in database, then we close all the databases that we may have opened. If the session does not go into the database, store it in a cookie or in file, depending on the configuration. And if this request was an AJAX request, put certain things into the headers. This is required for components. We'll see this later. Store the cookies. The second possibility is that we have a restricted error. This is a different type of exception. This is not a control flow exception. This means that something happened, but there was an error, but the error occurred in a model or a controller or a view. This occurred into a file that is part of a user application, is not part of the web2py code itself. This is an error that we want to capture and we want to issue a ticket. So this is what it does. We issue a ticket and we roll back any database transaction we may have. Finally, if anything else goes wrong at any level, like in doing a rollback or in saving the session and if it goes back bad because there is a bug, if it goes bad because there is a bug in web2py, then we get here. If we get here, what we do is we still try to roll back everything because we never know what happened, and we still try to issue a ticket, but in this case the ticket goes into the admin application, and worst case scenario, we don't issue a ticket, but we log the error message to the console. That's the worst case scenario. That means we have a bug in web2py usually. Finally, make sure you close every file that you may have opened and just send whatever you have so far to the client. So this is the basic WGA application. Almost everything is in there. So let's see what else we have. New cron is the cron implementation of web2py. It's more of a legacy feature. It works, but as I said, we have better ways to do recurrent tasks in background. MyRegEx is a list of regular expressions that are needed by web2py. PortaLocker implements file locking in a portable way that works on Windows, Mac, and Linux. Reserved SQL keywords just contains a list of all the SQL reserved keywords for the different supported databases. So when you try to create a table, or you try to create a table with a certain field name, it first checks if that's a reserved keyword for one or for all the supported databases. Restricted, what it does, it executes controller code and models code and template code into an environment and captures any exception that may originate and raises a restricted exception, which is the one that triggers a ticket. So this is not actually a restricted environment. We are not trying to limit what code can go into models, controllers, and views. The only thing we're trying to do is whatever the user does, if there is a bug, we want to capture the exception, get the stack trace, and log everything. Rewrite implements the roots mechanism, so it loads what's called a web2py file, which is a configuration file that you can optionally create in web2py, and defines a mapping between URLs and function calls. So what this file does, it reads this configuration file and it stores the mapping and it implements the mapping. So main.py eventually calls a function in rewrite that maps the URL into function call. Sanitizer, what this does is this takes some XML or HTML and removes unsafe code from it. For example, removes scripts from it, removes tag attributes that we define to be unsafe. So the sanitizer is actually called by the XML helper. So we've seen everything under the cron folder, which contains all the web2py modules. There are other folders in here. So we discussed applications, deposit. So deposit is typically empty, but when we use the web-based IDE to upload a new application, the application gets first downloaded under deposit and then gets unzipped in the proper location, which is under applications. Similarly, if you delete an application, it does not get completely deleted. First, it gets zipped into the deposit folder, then it gets deleted. In that way, if you made a mistake, you can recover it from the deposit folder. Examples, this contains example configuration files. You should read the README file in here, but basically all these configuration files must be copied into the root level web2py folder in order to be used. And you need to remove the .example part, and then you may need to edit them. So an example would be the roots. So this is the file in which you can redefine the mapping between URLs and function calls. You can actually define the mapping in a very granular way based on whether it's a GET or a POST request, based on the client IP address, based on the required host name in case you are hosting application with different host names. Queue is an example of configuration of the Google App Engine queues, and again a configuration of the Google App Engine. Options is used in the case in which you are running web2py as a Windows service. So the options cannot be specified from the command line, but they need to be read from a file. And app, this is also for the Google App Engine. Extras. So these are things that you probably never need to look into, but we use them in order to build web2py. So these are programs that we need to make the Windows binary and to make the Windows binary and the OS X binary. Configuration of the epidoc. So what's the epidoc? It's somewhere in here. If we go into docs and resources, here's the epidoc. So all the web2py API are documented in the epidoc. So there's style and images associated with these documents, and you can find them. We put them in this folder. And same icons that are necessary for web2py, like the web2py icons that appear in the startup widget. We looked into Gluon. Let's look into handlers. So these handlers are, the most important one is the WSGI handler. If you have any WSGI web server like Apache or Micro WSGI, there are a number of them. The way you would use them is you don't start web2py with web2py.py, but you would take the WSGI handler, copy it into the web2py root folder, and you would make your web server point to the WSGI handler. So when the web server starts, it locates the WSGI handler, it finds in there the application, the web2py application, the one that defines the framework, and when an HTTP request arrives, it delegates, it dispatches the request to the application which is into WSGI handler, which starts the framework, and the framework will then call the user applications. So some web servers do not support WSGI, but they may support SCGI, or they may support mod Python, or they may support ISAPI, like older version of IIS, or you may be on the Google App Engine, which is its own mechanism for communication between the web server and the web application, or you may support FCGI, or you may have something very old that only supports CGI. So each of these systems has a way of starting a Python web application, in our case starting the Python web framework. So you have to locate the correct handler, you have to copy it into the top level web2py folder, and you have to configure your web server to point to the proper handler. So why do you have to copy them? Because each web server has its own features and has its own requirements. So sometimes you may need to edit these files. So what we want is for you to copy only those that you need and edit them as the documentation of the web server tells you to do, so that you never need to actually touch the original. And this is better because if you upgrade web2py and you get a new copy of it, you don't want to overwrite the one that you have edited. Most of the times you don't really need to edit them. Most of the time you just need to pick a web server, read the documentation about how you start Python programs, and copy the handler. That's all you need to do. These files, HTTP server log and HTTP server PID, are created when web2py starts. Here it logs all the HTTP requests. Here it logs the process ID. This is only done if you start web2py with the Rocket web server. This is not done if you use Apache, for example. This is where the logs are supposed to be. So you may have application level logs, and they will go into that folder. Scripts. This is a very long list of utilities and configuration scripts. These are not web2py programs. These are not used by web2py, but for example, if you want to set up web2py with Nginx and Micro WSGI on OpenSUSE, you download the script and you run it. Again, it should work out of the box, but different versions may do things differently. You may want to look into it to configure something, like you may want to install it in a different place than the default. You may want to change some parameter. So this is what you do. Like if you want to set up web2py on Heroku, on Fedora, on Ubuntu, if you want to do it, let's see, what kind of options here. Yeah, this one installs with Apache, so if it's not specified, it's using Apache. Finally, there is one more folder, which is site packages. And in site packages, we put modules that we want to make available to all our applications. And so we've seen that sometimes we put modules into the applications, one specific application modules folder, but sometimes we want to put modules in a place where it's available to all of them. There are a few important files in here. Let me close some of the folders that we opened. Okay, so the web2py license version. So this file contains the web2py version. It's important not to edit this file because it's used by the automatic updates. Web2py never updates without you starting the process. You have to press the button to update, but it needs to check into this file which one is the current version. Then there is welcome w2p. W2p files are nothing but tar-gzipped folders that contain web2py applications. So when web2py starts, it locates the welcome application and tar-gzips it into welcome.w2p. And every time you need to make a new application, what it will do, it will unzip it again into a new folder. The reason for this is you may have changed the welcome application and you may not want to use the new one as template. At the same time, you may want to do that. Sometimes you want to edit the welcome application and you want to use the new welcome as template. So all you have to do is remove this welcome.w2p file, and web2py will make a new one based on your current welcome application, and that will be the template. Another file which is very important is this parameters underscore 8000.py. So when you start web2py, normally you start it with the Rocket web server, and normally when you are testing it, debugging and so on, you run on port 8000, and you want to expose the administrative interface on port 8000. Now this file stores the hashed administrator password for port 8000. Now if you decide to run web2py on a different port, what you would do is you would create a parameters with a different port number. Actually, let's do that. Okay, so let me stop web2py from running and let me run another copy of web2py on port 8001. Now what you see is that a new file has been created, and this new file contains the new administrative password hashed for port 8001. So where does the password come from? If you look carefully what I typed, when I start web2py, I usually start web2py with Python, web2py, and then I specify a password. Now if I don't specify a password here, it will ask me for a password, or will ask me through the GUI. So I choose a password here. So in this moment, this file gets created and the password is in there. You can look at it and you can see it contains the password hashed using the PBKDF2 algorithm. Sometimes you start web2py with a different web server than Rocket. So you started using, for example, Apache, or you started using Nginx. In that case, this file does not get created because there is nothing that triggers the creation of the file. So you may have to do it manually. So let's say you want to expose the web-based administrative interface on port 443. So what would you do? So what we can do is we can look into gluon admin file, and in here there is a create in here in gluon file utils. In this case, we can look into in this case, we can look into a script like setup web2py on Ubuntu, and we can look at the end of the script and we see how it's done. So this is how it's done. So from gluol main, there is a function called save password, which you can import, and you can save the password for port 443. So let's actually copy this code and do it. So this is asking me for the administrator password, and I say something like hello there. So now a parameters is being created for port 443, which means even if I'm using Apache or Nginx, if I'm using port 443, now I have a way to use the administrative interface because I've created a password to do that. I'm going to remove those that I don't want. If you remove them all, you're not going to have an administrative interface exposed. And some people for security prefer not to have one. Sometimes we recommend that if your site is really managing sensitive data, we recommend that you only expose the administrative interface on localhost and you access it through an SSH tunnel. In order to access it from localhost, what you need is a parameters 8000 file, and you need to run an instance of web2py on port 8000 on localhost only. So you're going to have one instance of web2py running with, for example, Apache on port 80, but port 80 is not going to have a parameters 80 file, so it's not going to expose admin, and you're going to have another parameters for a copy of web2py running with Rocket, which you can only access through the SSH tunnel. This is documented in the manual if you need to learn more about it. We are now going to learn more about the database abstraction layer. Now we can use the database abstraction layer from inside web2py models, controllers, and views, but we can also use it from any regular Python shell. So just for demonstration purposes, I will do that, but the API do not change. So if you're in a normal Python shell, all I have to do from gluon, which is the folder where the web2py modules are, I have to import the DAL and the field. So these are two classes. DAL is the class that represents a database connection. Field is the class that represents a field. There are other classes which are important, like a table or row or a set of rows, but you don't need to import them because instances of those classes will be returned by the methods that we're going to look at. So the simplest thing we can do is we can say DB is a database connection to a SAN database. So it could be a MySQL database, in which case you specify username, password, and you specify the host name, and you specify the port, and you specify the database name. This is a possible syntax. If I don't have a MySQL connection, I can always connect to a SQLite database and I connect to SQLite database in a certain file, so I can choose the name of the file like test.sqlite. So this will actually create the file if it does not exist. There are some optional parameters you can set, and one of the optional parameters is pool size. Now in the case of SQLite, this doesn't do anything, but in the case of a MySQL database or a PostgreSQL database, what happens is that these are client-server databases, so our application accessing it is the client and the database is the server. So in order to establish the connection, it takes some time, and if you are done with the connection, you may not want to close it, but you may want to keep the connection open and recycle for the next queries that you need to make. So you want to keep a pool of connections, and pool size determines the maximum pool size. So the first time a connection is, imagine that now you are running this db equal dal into a model, and the model is part of a web2py application which is accessed concurrently by many web browsers. So different web browsers may connect more or less at the same time. Each one of them will execute db equal dal. Each one of them will establish a connection with database. Each one of them eventually will finish, and then new connections arrive. So you want to be able to recycle those connections, and you want to keep a number of them open, and you want to set the maximum that you keep open. Otherwise, you don't want to grow this pool size arbitrarily. If you don't set it, the maximum is assumed to be 1, which means that every connection will be automatically closed when done. In the case of SQLite database, that would happen anyway, because this is a file-based database. It can be accessed concurrently for read but not for write, so essentially all queries are serialized anyway. One more important feature of this DAL object is that the URI, so the URI is the Universal Resource Identifier, which right now it's a string, could actually be a list of strings. So this would be a list of strings in the case in which you are concerned about high availability and you set up a replicated master-slave database, and what you would put here is a list of URLs that point to different database slaves which replicate the master database. So what happens is that web2py will not always connect to the first one, but will perform a round robin, will connect to one of them at random in order to minimize the load on each one of them. And if the connection fails because that particular instance of the database is down, then web2py will try to connect to another one. And web2py will loop over all the available URIs, so you can have more here. And we'll try up to 5 times. If it fails, then we'll raise an exception because it will be unable to connect. So this is how we handle connection pooling and high availability for the database. So we now have established a connection database. We can ask, again, what's the URI, and we can get SQLite, test SQLite. Notice that the SQLite database also determines which adapter to use. So adapter is the object that will handle the connection and implements how the API of the database abstraction layer convert into the SQL dialect of this particular database. So right now, because we are connecting to SQLite database, the DB adapter will be SQLite adapter. So the DB object will delegate all the generation of the SQL to this SQLite adapter. This happens under the hood. Most people don't ever need to look at that, but it's important to know that the Gruel DAL folder file contains a SQLite adapter, contains one adapter for each one of the supported backend databases, and these adapters are responsible for the actual generation of the SQL, and if you want to support a different one, you can make your own adapter. Anyway, we have this DB connector. The most important thing we can do with it is we can define tables. So a table is a name and has fields. And a field could be name, and could be another field could be phone number. So we have created this table person. Now, we can refer to the table using db dot in the name of the table. So db dot person. We can refer to a field as db dot the name of the table dot the name of the field. So one thing we can do with a table is we can insert records. So table.insert will insert a record. We insert a record by specifying the value of its fields, like the field name could be Max and the phone number could be 111. And we can insert another record. And we can insert another record. Next thing we may want to do is retrieve a record. So we can retrieve a particular record if we know the ID. So we can do this by saying record. Let me call it row instead. Row equal db person. And we can use different notations here. So we can say round bracket number 1, and we can print this row. So this row looks very much like a dictionary, contains name, max, phone 111. It's actually a row object. But like a dictionary, we can get the name, or we can get the phone. But a row object can also be accessed using the dot notation in the same way. Now we can retrieve a row object using square bracket notation. And what's the difference? Well, the difference is what happens if we try something that doesn't exist. So if I try something that doesn't exist with the square notation, I get none. Actually, no, there's no difference. Interesting. The difference is actually with the square notation, I can also search using different criteria. For example, name equal max. Or I can search by phone equal 112 and name equal Tim. And if the record does not exist, again I get none. Sometimes we may need to perform more complex queries than this. And then there is a syntax to perform more complex queries. And the syntax is the following. Rows equal db, we put a query in there, dot select. And again, we can put other parameters in there. So let's see what is a query. A query is something of the form db table name equal max. So this would be a query. Now we're selecting all those records that have a table name equal max. In our case, table should be person, right? So now I can print the rows, and okay, I have only one. Let's try a different query. Name equal max, or is vertical bar, odb person name equal Tim. Print rows. When I print rows, what I get a representation of the rows as comma separated values, but I can always get a particular row, like give me row number 0 or row number 1, and they are row objects. I can say rows the first. First. I believe I can do last. And the rows object has most of the attributes of a list, so you can do operations on it. So you can concatenate queries with or, and, this case would be empty. We can ask what the length of rows is, and we get empty. We can build queries which are more complex, like the name is greater or equal to Max, and actually it's greater or equal to Max, and is less equal Tim. So in this case, we're gonna get again both of them. We can be more sophisticated and go from A to Z. And we get the 3 people in there. So we can combine queries with AND, or we can also do it, we can also use NOT. So we can do NOT DB person name less than F. Print rows. And in this case we get 3 of them, so let's try less than M. And in this case we don't get John because J comes before M. We can use elementary queries which are more complex than just simple comparisons. So we can ask starts with and J. We can ask that E contains an M. And notice that this is done in a case-insensitive way. We can check if the name belongs to a set. We can check that a subset, for example, the first character, from 0 to the first character, belongs to M or T. Now, or we can search that the second character, actually let's do the third character, is an X or an H. So we can build very complex expressions here and combine them to build very difficult queries. We can always print db last SQL to see the generated SQL, and we will find that the generated SQL may differ for different database backends, and sometimes it's quite complicated. Like in this case, we're doing a substring, and then we're looking that the substring is into a set of strings. Also notice that by default, we are selecting all the fields of the table. Now in this table, we have defined a field name and a field phone. There's also a field ID. Every time we define a table, unless we specify otherwise, we get a field ID of type integer auto increment. And this is the one that we get returned when we insert a new record. Now when we select rows, we can also say we want all rows for a certain table, and we can select all the rows. We can also specify which columns we want. For example, we may only want the DB person name, but not the ID and not the phone. We can do more complex things, like let's insert again let me insert a few more people here with same names as before. Okay, so let's set another max with number 211 and 311. Now let's select all the rows and print the rows. So what I see is that we have 3 different max. Now when we select the names, we can also group by a certain parameter, like group them by DB person name. Print rows, and we find John, Max, and theme, and there's only one Max because we're grouping by that. Now when we group, we can, for example, count certain parameters. For example, we can ask for the DB person ID, we want to count how many there are when we group them by name. Let's print the rows. Now we get a more complex structure, and we get again 2 columns. There is one John, there are 3 Max, and there is one Tim. Let's create another table. And a dog as an owner, and the owner of the dog is a reference to a person. So let's insert a new dog, and we specify the 2 columns, name and owner. Now the owner is supposed to be an ID, so I'm gonna set ID 1, and let's create another dog. And let's create another dog. Okay. So now, like we did before, we can look for dogs and we can select them all. So we see the ID of the dog, the name of the dog, and the ID of the owner. So let me get one of these rows. Let me get the first row, or I can say equivalently the first row. And this first row I can get the ID. First row, I can get the ID. Or I can get the name of the first row. Or I can get the owner of the first row. And when I get the owner of the first row, I get the ID of the owner. But actually, even if it displays this as ID, this is a reference object. So if I say owner.name, I get the name of the owner of the dog. And if I get owner.id, I get the ID on the owner. Or I can get the phone of the owner of the dog. Notice that when the first .name is called, this performs a recursive select to get the name. But when I do the ID, it's not performing another select, it remembers the previous one. So we can ask what's the last SQL that was performed, and you see that the last SQL was performed retrieved all the information about this owner, which we may or may not need at a later stage. In this case, we retrieved everything here and we saw it later. We can also print, we can also see what's inside a database, and well, there are different information database, but there is one variable called timings. Let's see if we can spot it in here. I don't, but we can print it. What it does, it is a list. Let's print the first item, and it's a list of tuples where the first term is a select, and the second is a SQL statement. The second one is the time it took to execute. So we can look at the last statement, and we can see how long it took to execute. So timings keeps track of all the SQL queries we make and how long they take to execute. Now going back to our tables, so let's figure out, let's summarize what we have. Which tables do we have? Which tables do we have? Person and dog. And table person, which fields does he have? ID, name, and phone. And dog, which fields does he have? It has a DB, a name, and an owner. And if I look at one of these, DB dog owner, what type is it? What is actually the name of the field? What's actually the table of the name of the table this field belongs to? And there are other things we can do with the fields, which is we can ask, and we can use different methods to build more complex queries. So we've seen some of them. We've seen DB person ID count. Okay, so what this is just an expression. It's not performing any database select, any database IO. But if I perform a DB person select DB person ID count, then this will be performing a count, and now I can print the rows, and I can see that I'm printing the wrong thing. I can see that the count is 5. Let me do it again. Print the row. The count is 5, so there are 5 people in this database. Let's do the same with dogs. Now let's print how many dogs each owner has. So we count and we group them by DB dog owner. And let's see also not just the count, but DB owner ID. Well, DB dog owner ID. DB dog owner. Okay, print row. So we see that dog number owner number 1 has 2 dogs, number 2 has 2. Now, I would like to actually know the names of those owners. So one way to do it is to do a recursive select. I put this into rows. For row in rows, print row owner name. This is not going to work, but let's see why. And then somehow I need to refer to the dog ID count. So the way to do that is, this is the column I want, and I can put it in square brackets. Now this is not going to work because now this row does not have an owner anymore. Why doesn't it do it? Well, let's print that. Let's look at the first row. And we see that because we have selected both a field and an aggregate, then I have to specify that the owner, I'm referring to the owner of the dog, because there may be some other field called owner in one of the aggregates and things may get ambiguous. So I need to specify that for every row in rows, I want the dog owner name. So Max has 2 dogs, Tim has 1 dog. Let's do this again in one step here. Okay. So from the table dog, select the DB dog owner, and for every row, print the row dog owner name, and then select the DB dog ID, but count them. So this is not a column, but it's not a column in one of the tables, but it's going to be a column in the results of the select, so inside the rows, and I retrieve it using the square brackets, and then I group them by, so I count. Now, in this way, I'm doing 3 selects. So I'm doing 1 select here, and I'm doing 1 select for each row. And the 1 select is performed here when I take the row dog owner, which is a reference, and I try to get the name of that owner. Can this be done with a single select? Yes, it can be done, but what I need to do is a join. Now, let's explain how to do this. First, let's see that a query is something of the form DB dog ID belongs to 1, 2, 3. Okay, something like this. And then I get the rows by saying DB query select. This is what we always do. Now, so far, a query has always been an expression that involves a single table. Actually, we can have queries that involve two tables. So, for example, give me the dog owner, which is equal to a person ID. And I should have two equals here because I'm actually making a comparison. Now, this is actually not performing any database I/O. This is defining a query. But now I can select from this query. I can do rows equal rows equal from this query, select everything, print rows. So what do I get? I get that Max with a D1. So the first column is the ID. Max is D1. The second column is the name of the person. And then I have the person phone number. And then I have the dog ID, the dog name, the dog owner. So Max owns Skipper, Max owns Snoopy, Tim owns Wolf. So here I define a constraint between two tables. And when I do a select, I select everything that matches the constraint. So if the constraint involves two tables, I'm gonna get records that spawns the two tables and link them. That's called a join. And the constraint is that the dog owner has to be the person ID. So for every one dog record, I get one person record. And this is all fine. Now let's only select the DB person name and DB dog name. Now I can filter the columns by columns of two distinct tables because they are both in the query. I can also get the dog ID or I can group by dog ID and perhaps I can count them. Actually, I want to group by person ID or by person name. Okay, so for every person name, count how many dog IDs there are and group them by person name. Some databases will also allow me to group by person ID, so there may be two people with the same name but different IDs, and they have different sets of dogs, and I should be able to do it. Okay, so Tim has two dogs. Well, Max has two dogs, Tim has one dog. And as before, I can get one row, and I can see what it is. So it's a row object. And now you see that this contains both a person and extra information. So the person has a name, which is the owner, and has extra information which I can access using the square syntax. Let's go again to select the person name and the dog name. Now we see the syntax again if I get the first row. We see that a row now contains a person, which is a name, and a dog, which is a name. These are the only things I'm selecting. And now you see why it becomes important to do row.person.name. Person.name versus row.dog.name. And rows.name would be ambiguous because there may be a conflict. And the same happens, this does not happen if I select a single column. So if I only select the DB person, select, then I can do rows0 name because it's obvious that there can only be one column called name. But if I do a join or any more complex type of select, then it's not obvious that there is a single column called name. There may be two. In this case, there may be a person name and a dog name. I need to specify which one of them. So when I do aggregates, the query becomes more complex, and we need to disambiguate this possibility. So what are the attributes of a select? Well, let's see what we can do. Let's start again with a single table. So first I can list various fields separated by a comma. but then I can specify some named attributes. We've seen order by. We can also do, let me print this first. I can also do order by, and let's order them by DB person name, so they will come up in alphabetical order. Now let's have them in alphabetical order and in order of in alphabetical order, and then in order of ID, the person ID. So nothing has changed in this case, but let's try reverse the person ID. So I want them first in alphabetical order, but then people that have the same name, I want in reversed the B person ID order. So now you see that this 145 have been reversed into 541. Okay, so I can specify a order by, and an order by is given by a set of expressions. An expression can be a field. Fields can be concatenated with an OR and can be negated with a tilde. You can use more complex expressions here. So I want to sort them by the first name, but not all the characters. I want to sort them by the second character of the person name, and then by ID, reversed. Okay, now you see that the second character is A, comes before I, comes before O. And then the maxes of the second character A, which is common, and now the ID is reversed. So you can make fairly complicated expressions here. Another thing you can do is limit by. So I want all of them, I want the first two of them. Now I want to skip the first two, I want the next two, from 2 to 4 excluding 4. So this allows me to do pagination. And again, we can print the last SQL which you've generated, and we see that we're using the limit and the offset SQL keywords. Now, limit by is implemented in very different ways in different database backends because some database backends don't fully support paginations. One of them is Oracle, and in fact this select would be converted into a 3 nested selects in SQL. In Oracle is very complex SQL in that case. So the most general thing we can do is give me a query, specify the fields, specify an order, specify a grouping, specify a limit, you start at 0. And there are a few other optional things we can do that we're going to see in a moment. Now, let's talk more about queries with joins. Actually, let's print this query that we're doing, right? Okay, so the query we're looking at is DB dog owner equal person. This is just a representation of the query. It's not the query as we wrote it. We wrote it as DB dog owner equal DB person ID. But if I were to print it, I would get some representation of it, which is a string. And actually is the corresponding SQL string. So I can do a select, and I can retrieve them all. Notice that I only get a column, a record for a person if the person has a dog. If the person does not have any dog, I don't get any record for the person. So how can that be done? Well, there is a way to do that by using an outer join. So the kind of join we've been doing so far is called an inner join. Now we're doing an outer join, and it's done in a different way. So this is how it's done. First of all, we select our persons, and now we select the things that we want. We want a person, and we want a dog name. But now dog name has not been selected, so we need to do a join, and we want to do what's called a left join. A left join or an outer join is the same thing. So we want to do a left join on DB dog. So the table dog, which was not selected, we want to attach it to the person so we can actually get the dog's name. And we want to do a left join on the table dog on a certain condition. The condition is the one we used before, like the DB dog owner equal DB person ID. So it's the same query we had before. Okay, let's actually look at the generated SQL. Okay, so we're actually selecting person name and dog name from person, where we're doing a left join on dog using this condition. Let's print the rows. And now we see that Max is Skipper, Max is Snoopy, Tim is Wolf, John is nothing, and these other two people called Max have also nothing. So this is not the same person. Two other people that have different IDs, so they appear there. Now we can do left joins or more complex queries. We can do multiple left joins by using a list of left joins. So you can left join multiple tables. It is time to start building a new web application. We're going to copy an existing application, and we're going to copy reddit.com. So let's see how it works. Basically, there are categories, for example, world news, and within categories we can log in. And after we log in, we can submit a link. So link is a title, perhaps optionally a URL, and the category. When we submit an item, the item appears under news. And people who are logged in can vote something, let's see, vote something up or down, and can comment. Let's look for something more interesting here. Yeah, there's some comments. And so you can see people have commented and people can respond to a given comment. So we're going to clone this system. So let's do it using web2py. So let's make a new application, and we're going to call it Reddit clone. So here we have it. We start from building the model. We're not going to use any plugin, even if we could use plugins and make our life easier, so we're going to start from scratch. Let's make a database, let's call it DB1. And let's define a table. The first table we need is a table to store categories. So I'm going to call it category. And a category has a name. Actually, it doesn't need anything else. Then we define another table, and this table is a post. So what's in a post? Well, first of all, a post is going to have a category. So it's going to reference a category. Then a post is going to have a title, and it's going to reference. Actually, it's not going to reference anything. It's just going to be a string. and the post has a body. So the body is going to be some longer text. Also, the post has something, needs to know something about the author and when it was posted. So we're going to say that it needs a signature. So by adding a signature to the post, what we are essentially doing, we are adding 5 additional fields. These additional fields are created on, I'm going to write them here, created on, created by, modified on, modified by, and is active. So created on, created by, modified on, and modified by have some intuitive meaning. Is active, we will not be using it, but it's something that will allow us to mark a post as something which, for example, we don't want to show, but we don't want to delete it from the system. Created by and modified by are references to users. Created on, modified on are date times. Created on and created by are automatically populated when a post record is created, and created on is populated with the date time when the record is created, and created by with the author of the logged in user who creates the record post. Modified on and modified by are also populated initially with the time when the record is created and the reference to the record creator, but if the record gets modified, they get updated and they contain respectively the date time when the record is modified and the ID of the user who modifies the record. So we can keep track of these changes. So what else do we need? Well, a post may have votes, and votes is an integer. What else do we need? Well, we need to keep track of who votes, right? To prevent people from voting twice. So we need a table vote, and we need to know for which post and what type of vote this is. So we can have an up vote or a negative vote. So let's store a number associated to the vote. Let's call it score, and we make this integer, and we default it, for example, to +1, and we can have different options like +1, -1, 0. What else do we need to know? We need to know who actually submits the vote, and that would be a note signature. So every time somebody votes, we're going to update the total list of votes associated to a post so we can sort things properly, but also we keep track of individual votes to prevent a person from voting twice. We may want to allow a person to change its vote, so we keep track of it. Then we need comments. So we need a table comment, and the only thing in a comment is the body of the comment, and that's text, and also the auth signature, because we want to know who posted the comment and when the comment was posted. Also, we need to know which post is this comment about. We may want to allow posts which are comments which are threaded. So you answer a parent post, a parent comment. In that case, well, we can make this optional, but let's implement the field right now. Parent comment, parent, and this will be a reference to another comment. Notice that we're now introducing a circular reference, so one comment can reference another comment because it's a response to another comment. So this will naturally create threaded comments. The problem is going to be visualizing them, and we'll work on it as an improvement to the code. Comments themselves could have votes, and we may want to be able to count the votes associated to a given comment, and of course we need to record votes associated to individual comments, so they would reference a comment. Okay, this is the database structure that we need, and of course we can add more tables, and we will not be using all of them immediately, but this is how we can start building our application. So let's save it, go back, let's see if this part is working. So the tables are being created, and we have some error, so let's see what the error is. And actually comment is a reserved keyword, so we go and fix it. Let's just call com, meaning comment. Let's check this out. And we still have a comment somewhere. Here we go. Okay, so our tables category, post, vote, com, and comment vote have been created. So first thing that we need is figure out which pages we need. Okay, so let's erase everything we have in here, and let's figure out which pages we need. Well, certainly we need pages for user authentication and to download images, if we're allowed to upload images, and services. So we're going to leave this part around. So we are going to need an index page that is going to list all our categories, so we can start somewhere. Now we need a page that lists posts, and we need to list posts in different ways. We may list posts which are new. We may list posts which are the most voted. We can say by votes. We can call this by date. We can also list posts by author. In this case, we would specify by which author, so I can see all my posts or all posts posted by a given author. We need a page to make a new post. Let's call it create post, and we may need one to edit a post. Actually, they could be the same action because the operations are really similar, but let's not do that. Okay, then we need something to view a post. And we need something to be able to comment. We want to probably do that into the view post, so we'll figure out later different strategies to do that. We also need to be able to vote on a post, so we want some kind of callback that we'll be calling using AJAX. So when I press a button, I don't want to refresh the page, but want to make an AJAX request. So I'm going to make a vote callback. And also we may need to be able to vote comments. Well, this is not everything that there is, but let's start working with this part. So if we edit a post, the first thing we need to figure out is which post will be editing. So we need to pass an argument to edit post, and we need to pass an argument which is the request args0 will be the ID of the post we want to edit, and this is going to be an integer. So if we list post by date time, probably we don't need much, except we may have pages, so we may want to some extra spaces here. Okay, we may want to paginate, so we may want to set page number. We'll figure out later exactly how to do this. Also, when I list posts by votes, I may want to list which page. I may have multiple pages of posts sorted by votes. And when I list posts by date time and I list posts by votes and so on, I also may need to specify a category. So let's figure out a strategy here. So let's say that when we call any of these URLs, we do it like this: HTTP hostname app controller, so default, and then we call any one of these functions. So the first thing we do always, except for index, so index would just be index. For all the other ones, we're going to specify the category. So we can specify the category, for example, by name. And in some of them, we may need to specify what we're talking about. Like, if I create a post, I just need to know the category. If I edit a post, I need to know which category, but I also need to know the ID of the post I'm editing. And when I list post by date time, again I need to know the category. And when I list post by author, then perhaps I don't care about the category, but in that case I care about the author ID. So let's be more specific here. So we want to be able to create a post. We want to be able to edit a post. We want to be able to list post by date time. And I may want to have a page. And similarly, when I list post by votes. And I may want to list post by author. In this case, I specify the author ID or user ID. And I'm going to need something to view a post, and a view vote callback, and a com vote callback. So let's see how can we do this. If I view a post, I need to specify the category and perhaps the ID. And if I want to vote a post, I may need to specify again the ID, and I need to specify the vote. So this could be something like +1, -1, or something like this, up or down. We'll figure it out. And similarly, if we vote for a comment, we're going to need something similar. Now there are some cases there is some redundant information here. Like if I create a post, it must be clear which category. If I edit it, actually which category is not really relevant. If I list the posts, it's important to specify the category. If I list them by author, that's fine. If I want to view a post, I don't need to specify which category it is, because from the ID I can figure that out. If I want to vote for a post, again, I don't really need to know what the category. But if I want to vote a comment, I don't need the category, but I want to know which comment ID that is. And this is pretty much everything we need. We're going to need something to allow to post comments. We're not created that yet. This could be done inside the view post itself. We'll do it different ways. So this is the minimal number of functions that we need to implement. So now let's look at them. So in order to create a post, I need to have a category. So the category is going to be the request args 0. Now, again, how are we going to pass a category? Are we going to pass the name? So we can make the categories to be all alphanumeric. So this would be the category name. This would be the category name. And from the category name, we can actually retrieve the category. So the category would be category. Give me the one with name, category name. We can make a function out of this. It would be convenient to have a function out of this, which is get category. And return the category. So the category is get category. So who needs the category? Create post does, list posts by date time, list posts by votes, and that's all of it, right? Who needs the page? Well, the pages is needed always have argument number 1, so a second argument for this tree. They all are going to have the same logic. So the page number is argument number 1, and they all have it. In the case of list by author, we are going to need the first argument to be the user ID. So in this case, the user ID is the request args 0, and this is also an integer. Now if a page is not provided, so we're going to give a default to it. So a page defaults to 0, and let's always do this. So we're parsing everything that we need to parse here. So now view post needs to get the ID of the post that we are viewing. So we've done it for edit post, and view post will look exactly the same. So we retrieve the ID of the post that we're viewing. And vote callback, we need to figure out which post we want to vote about. In vote callback, we need to figure out which comment we're voting about. And they also take an additional argument, which is going to be the request args 1, which is going to be whether we vote up or down. So we can figure out the syntax here. We can actually have up or down. We can set here up or down, so we can take this as a string. So let's call it up, and then we can check out all those direction, and we can check if the direction is up or down. Okay, so we have basically implemented this structure here. Now let's see what they are supposed to do. Index is going to list the categories. So it's going to make a bunch of rows in which we select the category, select, and we're going to display them. Post is going to make a form, which is an SQL form, to post a category. Edit post is going to be able to allow me to edit a post given the ID of the post. Now I should only be able to do this if I am the author of the post. So we're going to set these rules in a moment, okay? List post by date time this is easy. So what we want to do is we want to first, when we do category, get category, right now we are getting the category ID and then we're getting the category record. So we know if we have a category. We may want to check if we don't have a category, like when we call get category and the argument here is a number, it's a string, we get the category name and we get the record that has that category name, but the problem is that this record might not exist. So let's do this. If not category, so if the B category doesn't return the record, we redirect to the URL of the index page and perhaps say something like page not found. Session flash a page not found. Okay, so we have separated this logic from everything else. So list post by date times, what it's supposed to do is supposed to get rows which are from the database db post category equal the category ID that we're looking at, and we want to sort them by date time. So we want to select order by in reverse chronological order. So db post created by or created on, and we want to limit them by page. So well, let's agree how many posts we're going to show in every page. Let's say we're going to show 10 in every page, and let's put this in a variable, posts per page. I'm gonna set 10. So when we perform our select, we want to do a limit by, and we want to do a start and a stop. So we need to compute the start and the stop. You probably fit out in one line. It does. So what's the start? Well, the start is the page times posts per page. So if you're looking at page 0, we start at 0. If you're looking at page 1, we start at 10. If you're looking at page 2, we start at 20. And what's the stop page? Is the start plus posts per page. This is how many we're going to show. Let's do list posts by vote. It's going to be the same thing, but we're going to sort them by votes. And again in reversed order, so the most voted one will appear on top. Now let's do by author. So if we look at post by author, we don't need to filter by category, but we filter by created by the user ID. We actually don't really need to check that the user ID is valid, because if we try to select posts by an author which does not exist, we just get an empty list. We could check if the author is valid, but it's just extra work that does not really pay off. And in this case, we will not post them by, we not order them by votes, but I would prefer to order them by created on, so we can see the most recent first. View post. For now, we are just going to get the post with this ID and return this post. But also, there may be comments associated to this post, and we may want to show those comments. So how do we do that? Well, let's look at the comments associated with this post. So we take the database, we select the DB comment, which reference this post. We select them all. In which order do we select them? Well, let's first select them in the order they were created. So I'm going to copy this logic here, but this is not about the post, but this is about the comment. It's actually called comment. Okay, so if I view a post, I should get the ID of the post, retrieve the post, and then get all the comments for this particular, for all the comments where the post column is equal to the post ID, the post that I'm looking at. And I select them in reversed chronological order. Again, we can change the order later. We can, for example, post them by vote. What else is necessary? Well, the post may not exist. So if this is none, we can redirect to the index page, to the URL of the index page. And okay, this is to do. This is to do. And actually there's some more to do's in here. But let's see what we have so far, okay? This may not work. We may need to fix a few things. Oh, well, let's start with index. Right, the clone, it shows no categories. I need to start with some categories. Let's bootstrap it first. And we can start it by creating some categories. So let's have programming, politics, and I don't know, science. Let's do a few more things. Let's make sure that when we create a new category, we require that it's not in the database itself, is particularly not in the category name field. So this is saying we want it to be unique. There are other things we may want to require, and I would require that it's a slug, which means it does not contain special characters. It's a string that can be put into a URL, like we try to do when we say default slash created post slash category. We may require it to be lowercase. Okay, so is lower. So now let's try it again. Let's try to create a new category. And let's try to put politics again here. And I can't because it's in the database. So let's call the index page, and now we see these categories. Now let's try to post something about one of these categories. Create post. Page not found. Create post about the category. Let's say a post about programming. Okay, so I'm getting my generic view representing the data returned by the action create post. Let's actually look at it. Okay, so we're calling create post. Create post defines a category, which is the one passed here, and a form. So these two variables are displayed. This is the category record, and this is the form. Eventually we'll create a view so we only display the information we want to display. So this form is, well, this is supposed to be create post, right? So this is supposed to be a post, and this is supposed to be a post. Try again, reload, reload. Okay, so this is supposed to be a post, category, title, body. Well, we already see that there are some things that don't quite work the way we intended. In particular, the DB post category should default to this category. Oh, look in the wrong place. This is the place. Should default to the category ID that we have, and this category should not be shown. I can do it here, or I can do it in the model. So let me do it in the model. So these references should actually be invisible. Because they're automatically set. Also, a post, instead of a body, can actually have a URL. So let's also keep this option. And it's a string, but we're going to require that is validated as a URL or empty. Is empty or is a URL. So let's see if this works. A mistake. The argument repeated. Readable and writable. Okay, so let's try create a post about programming. Again, let's see how this looks like. Oop. Edit clone, default, create post about programming. Okay, so this forms look better. It's more like I want it. It's still not exactly like I want it. For example, a title must be required. We require that this is not empty. We may also require not to be unique, but that's a big can of worms, so let me not do that for now. Votes, let's default it to 0, and also this should not show up in forms because this should be computed automatically when people vote. Let's reload this. Now it looks better. I have a title, I have a URL, and a body of a comment, and we're gonna make one of these two required. So for now, let me require everything. Let's also require the text. Let me require that this is not empty. What we can do is we require is not empty. If not, well, let's see. Let me require both for now, and then we see. Okay. So this works. Let's try to submit it. And okay, it's not doing anything because we have to process the forms. So how do we process the forms? When we create the forms, let's see where we have them. We have one form here, we need to process it. And this one we have to process it. So after we process something, we need to redirect to the different page. And where do we go? We can specify where we go next. So next we go to the URL of list post by date time, and the argument is the category name. So every time we post something, we go and we look at the post by category name. Instead, if we edit a post, probably after, or instead, even better, let's do something else. Let's just go to view post for the post we just created. This is even better and simpler. So you create a post and you create a form. When you process the form, next you go to view post. /ID means pass the ID of the record we just created. We can do this also for the edit post, which will make our life much easier. There are no other forms, so we don't need to add any other process. Okay, so let me try submit this. This is being processed. So first, let's post something about my first web2py course. Let's post a URL about this. So let's look on Vimeo, the IPD week 1. So I'm going to post it and some description. Here's as a link to a video about web2py class that I took today. Submit. So this has been posted. Now I get redirected to view post. So I get to redirect it here. Let me try edit that one. So if I want to edit, I just say edit. And now I get redirected back to the edit form, and I can click and I see it. Fine. So what else do we need? Let's list all posts by, oh look, here I'm using start and stop, which I've defined here, but not here. So every time we have a page, we need to start and stop. I cut and paste a piece, but not all of it. Okay, so now I should be able to list posts by date time. And I need to specify a category. So if I don't specify a category, what do I see? I get redirected back to index. But if I specify a category, I say about programming, and I see that this is the category object, and there are a bunch of rows, and there is a single post. But this is not displaying the way I want it displayed, but all the logic is already here. Let's post them by votes. And again, I see the same post, and there's only one, so it's sorting by votes. Let's post by author, and let's say author number 1. Okay. In this case, there are no posts. You see the list of rows is empty because there is nothing there. Let's check that the pages work. So how can we now check this better? We need to populate it with lots of information, and we don't really have lots of information. So let's post some junk. And this is what we're going to do. I'm going back to the edit page, and I'm going to the model, and I'm going to populate this stuff with some junk in the following way. db from gluon contrib populate import populate. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to check if the length, actually if the db auth user count, so count the users. If this is equal 1, so if there is a single user there, or let's say if there is less than 2, so this one or no users, just populate the table db auth user with 100 random users. And now we do the same with the posts. And if we have no posts, or if we have less than 2, we're going to populate the posts with 500 random posts. Let's commit at the end of each one of them, because they may take some time to perform. It's faster if we commit. And let's do the same with comments. So if com is less than 2, write about 1000 comments. Let's see how this works. I'm going to reload this page. This is going to take its time. It's going to making up lots of random text. Okay, that's done. And now we should be able to go back and look at list posts by date time for programming. I actually made a mistake here. I posted 500 posts and 500 posts in 1000 posts again, when actually I meant comments. So let me delete some of them. DB post with an ID greater than 500, delete them. And then make the comments. Let's try this again. Okay, so now we can actually remove this code and everything should be fine. So let's see what we have here. So we have our first 10 posts sorted by date time. Let's sort them by votes. And where they all have votes equal 0, some of the information is populated randomly. So let's view a particular one. View posts. View post number 343. Okay, so now we see that this is the post. It's a body, as title, has 3 comments. The way they're populated kind of makes sense, in the sense that if they are text fields or string fields, they're populated with random text. Numerical fields are populated with numerical values, and references are populated with valid references, but the populate function does not understand the structure of our application, which means a post may refer another post which is not in the same thread or is not in the same a comment may refer another comment which is not in the same post, and that's a bit misleading sometimes. At this point, this is almost functional. I mean, a lot of things are already functional. What we need to do is we need to make it look better so that it's easier to use. The various things we can do to make it better. Let's start from the menu. So let me edit the menu, and first of all, let me remove the web2py logo in there and call it Reddit clone. And you should change the meta author description keywords in generator. We're not going to do that. Everything below the development menu is optional. I'm going to remove it. The only thing it does, it displays this standard web2py menu, which we actually don't need. Instead, we want a home that points to index, and we want but what we really want is a list of categories here, right? So to make it work like Reddit. So let's do that. For every row in DB category select. We're going to take the response menu. We're going to append an item that looks like this. The row name capitalized. This would be the title. And it would link the URL of default list by votes. And release by votes what? We need to pass an argument, and the first argument we pass is the row name. Let's see how this works out. And we have an error somewhere. Capitalized should be the wrong thing. Should be title. Sorry about that. Title is a method of string objects. It's a Python function. Okay, so now we have home, programming, list posts, programming, list posts by vote, politics, science. Now we want to display these posts a little better, and so let's do that. What we need to do is we need to create a view for list posts. So we want a view for list posts by votes. So what should it do? Well, first of all, we want a title, and the title should display the category name converted to a title. Again, what does title do? Title takes the name which is lowercase and converts it to uppercase. Second thing we want to do is for every post in rows, where does this come from? Let's look at the controller again. We're creating a view for list post by votes. List post by votes returns rows, which are all the posts within a given category. So what we want to do is we simply want to loop over them and display each one of them. So we're going to display each one of them as its own div. We want to give it a class, and here is another place where Bootstrap helps us. So if we look at Twitter, Bootstrap, Twitter, sorry. Forget. It's never gonna go away, is it? Okay. Twitter Bootstrap. And we look at the style sheet, base CSS. There's something called well. Let's see if we can find it. Get started. Scaffolding, global styles. I can't find it. Well, we'll just use it. It's pretty sure it's in Bootstrap. There's a class called well. And what we're going to post here is the actual post title. And then we want to post a link to view this post. Let's try this part first. So I'm going to just reload this function now, and now I see them. So the class that well makes this border here. If I were to remove it, you would just do something like this. Instead, the class well makes things look better. Okay, so this should be actually a link. This is a title of a post that somebody made about science, and what this should really do, this should link, should be an anchor. So I can do it two ways. I can do href, href there's an auto-completion system in this editor that sometimes gets in the way. Okay, so this should link the URL of the view post and pass as argument the ID of this post. This is one way I can do it. There is another way, which is to use our web2py helper. So the helper is used this way. So you make an a tag and you pass an attribute to this tag, which is href. So the attributes actually have to be preceded by an underscore, and now you can pass the URL that you want in there. Okay, so this is shorter. I believe it to be more readable and things look better here. So now I can click on this post, I can go and read it and see the comments in this one, and again I can see it, go back and see the comments and so on. Okay, so there's one way you can do it. Now in front of it we want to post the votes. So we're going to post the number of votes. And now it's a style sheet matter how we're going to do it, so I'm just going to use a span here, again with the auto completion thing in the way, and we're going to give a class to this and votes. Okay, still looks the same, they're all 0 votes and so on. We want buttons to go to the next page and the previous page, and that's easy to do because we know which page are at. So if page greater than 0, then we should have a previous button. And pass. And if the page, if the number of items that we are returning, if the length of rows is greater or equal to 10, so if this page is full, most likely we have a next page. We can do this in a smarter way, as it is, the next page may be empty. Anyway, here we get the link next. Let's use Bootstrap to our advantage again, and let's give this a class, and the class would be, this is a button, and let's do the same for the other one. Now we have a better button. And so this must link a URL. So what URL? Well, this should actually link a URL for the same page, except for different, the same page, meaning the same action, but a different page number. So what should be the args? Well, it should be the same as the current category name. So we want another page in the same category when we press this previous button, but we want a page which is the current page minus 1. And here we'll be doing exactly the opposite. So same category, but page plus 1. Let's see if this is working. And I think we have some unbalanced brackets, so with 2 commas. There's 2 commas here. Okay, so with this button next, and now we have a previous and next, and the next, and the next, and get different. What else is missing? Right now, I'm looking at posts sorted by votes. Well, I may want to look at them sorted by a different criteria. So we're going to play the same trick. We're going to put a button here. Let's say sort by date time. And we're also going to make this a class button, and we're also making this go to the URL of list posts by date time, and we need to specify the category, and the category is the current category name. Okay, so by date time equals the other action. Now this one should actually do exactly the same thing. The only difference is the order in which these rows are sorted, but the view doesn't change, is the action which is different. And also it should not say sort by date time, it should say sort by votes and should link list post by votes. So it should be the reverse of this one, it should allow me to switch back and forth. So I may actually create another view, or I can use the same view. So let me just use the same view. So if the request function is list posts by votes, you do this. Otherwise, you reverse them. So how do I reverse them? Sort by votes and post list by votes. And go back to default. Now I've created a view for list post by date time, and I want it to work for list post by votes. So all I need to do is say that the response view is default. This one. Okay, let's try it. I've done the opposite, right? But they created this list post by votes. Try again. Okay, so by date time, I'll kind of get the same thing here. Probably because they don't have votes and they don't have date times, so they always appear sorted by the actual ID, because this field is probably not populated, this field is probably not populated, so no matter what I do get different actions. You can check we're getting different actions, you see. The records come out, because they are automatically generated, come out in the same order. Okay, so what else do I need to do? If we click on the link, as it is now, we actually go to view post. So let's implement this view post. Let's see how view post works. So view post retrieves the ID, retrieves the post from the ID, retrieves all the comments, and so we have these two variables, post and comments, that we basically need to display in the view. So we need a new view called default post view HTML, and let's edit it. So first thing we want is we want to display the post title, and we then want to display the post body. Let me put in a paragraph for now. and then we want to post the comments. Before looping, let's not just put comments here and see how this looks like, and then we'll improve it. So we can try it in a new tab. Well, as it is, it's not showing anything because I'm supposed to specify which post we are looking at, 343. It's nothing there. Let's look at one of these. Let's look at this one. Why is it not doing anything? Oh, post view instead of view post, right? Okay. So we create a default view post. Now we added it. Put the text back. We try this again. Okay, now it looks a little better. So we have a title. We have the actual the actual text of the post. And again, let's make this look a little better. Let's put all of this into make this in H2, so it's a little smaller. We put this into a div. Let's use the same class well that we used before, and let's put this part inside of it, and now the comments at the bottom. Okay, so this looks a little better. Now we can put the comments below. Before we work on the comments, let's work a little bit more on these links. So again, let's look at programming. So what this is doing, this is now always linking. It's always linking the actual page with the post. If we look how Reddit works, that's not quite what it does. What it does, it has a link to the actual document that we are posting about, so to the URL that was posted when we created the post record. Now we have a link to the comments, and this is the link to the comments that post to the internal page. This other link instead links the outside document. Okay, so we want it to work in the same way. Let's do that. In order for it to work the same way, we need to edit this view post one. This is unused, right? So the one which is unused is view post is used, so post view is unused. We can delete it. Okay, so we have list post by votes. This is what we had before. Now, when we loop over the posts in the list page, what we do is we always link the URL to view the post. But this actually is supposed to go into comments. And the title, so the post title, instead is supposed to go to the outside URL, which is the post URL. Now the thing is, we may have a post URL or not. So we do this if we have a post URL. Else, we just put post title. We may want to make this a little bigger, so we can make it strong. I said strong. Okay. So this goes in here. Okay. We haven't changed this part, but we'll change this part. Yeah, now this is strong, and then we have the comments. This goes to the external link. In this case, we don't have an external link. It's randomly generated, so it's dummy. And this goes into the comments. And so we end up that we have some randomly generated link that don't point to anything. And these comments we probably want to make in some kind of brackets, or perhaps to the. Let's actually go to the new line. Let's go to the new line. Okay, so it looks a lot much more like the other one. And we will make this look better if we use a table. So we make a table, and this table has a couple of rows, and each row contains comments or contains TDs. Okay, so in the first one we're going to put span with the votes, and we're going to put title, and the second one we're going to put the link to the comments. So the indentation is going to look a little better than before. Let's give it a try. Okay, so votes, link outside, link to comments. Fine, let's work more on the comments. Of course, these randomly generated titles are kind of not making any sense, but that's the whole point of it. Why do they all start with numbers? Oh, this one doesn't start with numbers. They are sorted. It's not working with the sorting. They appear to be sorted by alphabetically by title. Let's see. Is that what we wanted to do? This may be an artifact of how they were generated. It's really interesting. I'll figure this out later. We'll start writing our own posts and see what happens. Okay, so what else do we need? Well, we need a button to post our own comments. So we can go into this post by votes, and let's put a line here, and let's add a button to post something. Post a new link, and so this goes to create post and the category name. Also, let's make this button a different color. Let's make this a primary button. Again, that's a bootstrap style. So now we have post new link, and we get the redirect to this page, and everything else works as intended. So let's already post a new link, and you see it's posting a new link about programming. This is a test. URL goes to web2py.com. This is a test. And let's repeat it many times so we're going to see something show up. Okay, if I now go to programming, I go sort by date time. Yes, it shows up first, which is what I want, but if I sort by votes, it does not show before the other ones, shows last because they are alphabetical. Okay, so this is working exactly like we intended to work. And if I click on this is a link, I get redirected to the linked document. If I go to comments, I get what I posted and I can see the text. Let's fix a few more things. Let's go to the view of view posts, and when we have this title, we may actually want to link the post URL if we have a post URL, else we just display the post title, which is exactly what we did here, right? It's exactly the same. The same logic that we used here. So if I reload this page, yeah, I can click and I can go outside. Okay, let's go to one of the previous post pages, and let's look at the comments. And now we want to fix this part. Now we're not going to do threaded comments first. We're just going to do comments in the order in which they are posted. So we need to edit this page. So what we're going to do is for comment in comments. We're not working on optimizations yet. We're just trying to make it work. But eventually we will work on optimizations. So every comment is going to be in its own div. And we're going to make it a class. And we can again use the well class, which has served us well, as the name says. And here we have the comment body. Let's see how this works out. Okay, now I can see all the comments. Let's post the author of each one of these comments. So perhaps a good way to handle it would be to put quotes and to say by who posted it. So what I know is that I have the comment created by. Now the comment created by is an ID. This ID I can get the first name. Let's see if this works. Works unless I have broken references. Yes, I may have broken references. Because sometimes this reference is none. So we need to either fix that. Let's try this other. Yeah, we have the same problem. Let's just see who created it first. Okay, created by none, and this is the problem, is that the author is not populated. So what we can do is we can go to our DB1 and we can create a function. We can make a function author that takes the ID of an author, and if the ID is none, we return unknown. Otherwise, well, it figures out who the user is. And it returns the first name and the last name of this user. Now, how does this work? This is a normal Python string, and we have placeholders with names. These are placeholders for strings, and this is a Python dictionary. Well, it's a web2py storage object which extends a dictionary, so behaves like a dictionary. And this dictionary contains the user information, in particular the first name and last name. So if we use the percent notation, the placeholder gets replaced with the values corresponding to those keys in the dictionary. So let's see what we get here. We still get none, and now we're going to call this function because we defined that in a model is going to be available everywhere. So we just go to view post and created by, we call author. We could make this into a virtual field. Comment.author automatically calls that function. Let's leave it like that for this for now. We also want to know when this was posted. And let's go and look at the DB. So in DB, we import various things from Glue Tools. This you get from the scaffolding application. One of the things we import is pretty date. Pretty date is a function that knows how to make a date pretty, like converts a date into a string that describes the date. For example, 10 seconds ago, 1 hour ago, 10 days ago. So we can use that. So we can put a date here. comment created on date. So let's see how this works now. Okay, so 10 minutes ago by unknown, so I don't need the on over there, I shouldn't say on. And let me reverse it. Okay, 3 minutes ago unknown said, and this is the comment that he made. Can we make this better? Well, let's look at this author. Okay, let's go back to the DB1 where we define it. Well, what happens if I click, or if I have an author listed? Probably, instead of just saying the name, I should display a link, and this link should link all the posts by this author, so I can learn about this person. And how can we do that? We can just use the A helper and reference the URL of list posts by author, and what's the argument? Is the user ID. And well, it won't show up now because this is unknown, but it may show up if I create a new post. Let me do this using the app-admin interface. Let me go to app-admin. Let me create a new comment. And let me do about the last post that we had. So what was the last post? Let's look at it. I have all the posts. Let me get reverse post ID. And so this is the last post ID, 2502. No parent, and votes, no votes, and hello world. This is another test. Okay. Go back to the sign. Go back to index. We need to fix this part. But programming. So by date time. Let me look at these comments, and there should be a comment by me. It's not showing that comment that you just created. Something is wrong. Well, let's do it again. Or actually, let's look at compost. DB compost equal this number. Let's see if we have any. So somehow we didn't post it. Oh, I know why. Because this is the database administration, it's not automatically populating it. These are random names that the system made up, and I should be in there somewhere, and I should be number 1. I don't know where I am. Well, it doesn't matter. Okay, so now it was created. Okay, so now I see the post. So 1 minute ago, this person said, this is a test of a comment. So if I click, I get all the list of posts by this author. And again, what should be the view here? Well, it's the same view we used before. Let's go to default, and I have used this view for list post by date time, list post by votes, and I can use it here too. What changes? What changes is that if I look at it, if the function was list post by votes, I was displaying this link, and then I had an else. But now if I'm displaying all the posts by an author, I don't have a category object. I don't have a category I can show. So in this case, I need an else if. Request function list post by date time, and now I can post the other link. And I post the link to create a new entry only if it's one of these two cases. So let me again tell you what I'm talking about. Of course, there's some other mistake. It's another category defined somewhere. There's a category in the title. So in this case, instead of the title, we want the user. So we have first name. We can just use author. Try if this works out. Oh, here the user ID. Try again. Okay. So I can look at the programming, and I get this view, and here should say sort by time, because this is displaying sort by votes. If I click on it, it says post by date time, uses the same view in the if statement, displays sort by votes. In both cases, displays post a new link. If instead I click on an author of a comment, it lists post by this author number 30, it should display all these posts. There's no post yet, there are only comments by this person, but no posts. And the title should be the name, and there should be no buttons. So that's why we have those if statements. But this person may have posted something, and actually we can try and attribute something. So we just make a new post. Category, let's use programming. Title, nothing to say. Let's link the New York Times, and body, I'm drunk. And so who created this? This John Balls or Balls. Okay, so let's go back to our application, look for programming, look for the most recent ones, and now we see this 2, and let's look at this as a test, and I want to see everything posted by this guy, and here's something that he posted. Okay, so this is working so far. This home page, we have been kind of neglecting it. So what we want to do is want to list the categories. Let's just make this nice. There's not really much we need to do here, but we can make it nicer. So we can create. We didn't have to go back here. Just go to the index. So the index HTML is already there, but we can make it better. So I'm gonna delete everything that appears in there, and let's look for a second what the controller returns. So the controller here, index, returns rows. Every row is a category. So what we need to do is we just need to loop over for category in row. And what are we going to show? Let's make a div of class well. And for each one of them, we simply display an A button that contains the category name, which we turn into a title using the title method. So this is not the, when we have a post.title. That title is a column of the table post. When we have category.name, category is the table, name is the column. So category.name is a string, and now we're calling the title method of the string. This is a Python method. And here we can just link list posts by votes. For we pass this argument this category name, and we can have a nice class for this. We can use a button, and we can make the button large, and we can make the button primary. So these are classes which are provided by Twitter Bootstrap. Let's see how this page now looks. Looks bad, and there is something wrong with the indentation. Yes, so we're breaking Python code, which we can do, but in order to do it, we need to use the Python syntax for breaking, which is continue aligned with a slash, and that doesn't work either. Oh, that's not the problem. This is the problem. Let's try now. Okay, that works. Okay, so now we have these categories, and these buttons, well, I kind of don't like the fact that they have different widths, so we can fix that too, probably, by using style, and we can have a width, which is, well, let's make it 50% of the outer container. Yeah, I don't know, kind of looks better to me. I know it's a matter of preference, really. So if I click programming, come here, sort by date, post new link. Now this we can make a little better. We just don't need to display all the category objects. So create post, we need to fix. Also, we should be able to edit a post. So if I look at something like this is a test. Oh, comments. Yeah, I created this, so I should be able to edit it. So let's fix these two things, which are. Let's fix the latter first. Let's go to view. So view post. So I'm looking at this post, and here's the post body. Let me add something in here that says that if post created by me now it should be auth user ID, but now we have a minor issue here. What if somebody is looking at this and is not logged in? There is no auth user, so there is no auth user.id, but we can use auth.userid, which is a convenience variable, and this variable is set to the current user ID if a user is logged in, is set to none if the user is not logged in. So if the user is logged in, we just display a link to edit this post, and perhaps capitalized, and this references what? Well, it should reference edit post, which takes one argument, which is the ID of the post we're trying to edit, and here we see it as well. So we can go back to here. So we go to the URL of edit post, and we pass an argument, which is the post ID. And again, post we have everywhere here, just a record that we are looking at. Okay, so if I reload this, I have a button edit post. As usual, we can make it better because of these tickets. We can make it better by giving it a class. We can make a button, and we can make a button primary. Or sometimes we can use different colors, use info. There are different styles that come with the Bootstrap, and you can look them up. Okay, so this looks like a different color. I can click and I can go there to the edit page. Now this edit and this and the create what they do is they look very similar. They both display a form, but they're also very simple, so we can create them separately. The difference is that when we create a post, we have a category we're referring to. When we edit a post, we don't have a category we're referring to because this was already associated to a category. So let's do a couple things to improve it. Let's create the two views. Let's create a view for create post. So what this should do, this should just say post a new, say something new, or post a link, and the formula. You should say which category. We have that. We have the category record. Let's see where we have that. We're creating a view for this action, which is a category, which we can get with get category, and what it does, it gets a record given the name. Okay, so we have a category name, and we convert it to a title by capitalizing it. And we should say category for category, yeah. Let's see how this works out. I am need to go in creation mode. There. Okay, so something about a new link for category programming, and so this part is fine, and I get all the validators and everything I've done before. Okay. Now I want to do something similar for edit. So we create a new default edit post. We make it similar, but this should say edit your post. and for what category. The thing is, we don't have a category here. Let's look why. Because the way we implemented it is when we edit the post, with the ID of the post we want to edit, then we have a form, but we don't actually have a category. But that's not completely true, because we have the form. The form is an edit form, so it contains a record. So the record itself has a category, which is a reference, and that has a name, and that name we can convert into a title. Now this should work as long as the category is properly referenced. Okay, we can give it a try. Let's switch programming. Let's go to sort by date time, and let's look for something I wrote. Mistake. Something I wrote. Let me edit something I wrote here, and now it's getting everything properly. It's also showing the ID. The form is showing the ID of the record I'm editing. I may want to hide that thing. So when I'm in edit mode, I can say show ID equal false. Okay, so the ID is gone and that this is done. Few more improvements. Let's say I want to edit this and I want to support fancier notation, so automatic links like the embed protocol, and the ability to say something in bold, or say say more things, and perhaps say something in italic. So I want to be able to mark up the text using something which is not quite HTML, because people are not supposed to know HTML, and also because we don't want HTML to go into the content of a post body, which then gets embedded into the views and may not really look nice. So we want to use a wiki syntax to mark up the text, but limiting somewhat what people can do. So say something. Let's also add something fancier here. For example, let's allow people to post links. So let's go again to our Vimeo video, and let's allow somebody to write this comment and post a link to the Vimeo video, and perhaps an itemized list. This is what I think, and this and that. Okay, so this is pretty much intuitive wiki syntax. Its document is called markmin. We mentioned it before, and we want to support it. So what does it mean we want to support it? Well, I don't want to display this, but I want it to be converted to HTML automatically. Now this is really easy to do, because all I have to do, I have to go to the view to your post, and instead of putting this into a P, I have to call the helper, which is called markmin. And now I reload this page, and this is how it looks like. We can make it even smarter so that this actually embeds a video player, but let me not do this now. We've seen how this is done using the embed protocol. Let's do this at some later stage. Okay, so what else is needed here? I need the ability to post comments. That's missing. That's actually really easy to do because it's just another form. And let's think about it. So we have view post. It displays the post, displays the comment. So all we need to add is a form to post a new comment, right? A comment is actually db table com, and we want to process it. That's all we really need. And we need to edit the view, and after we display all the comments, we want to post the form. Perhaps we want to post the form into a well, perhaps not, I don't know. I'm going to leave this to you, but here you get the form, so you can post a comment. Now when we post a comment, certain things should be automatic. So the post should refer to this post. The parent should be the previous comment, if there is any. And the votes should be, it should not show, there should be no votes because it's a new comment, so votes should be 0. So let's do that. So the B comment post should be the current one. The B com parent com. So what's the previous comment? Now this may not really seem necessary because we are assuming that the comments are already sorted by dates. So we're assuming that we posted about the last one. But eventually we may want to tweak this and make it threaded comments. So for now, I will just make it point to the last one. So I make this point to comments last. So the last comments that I have selected. And wait, I'm posting the comments in reversed order. That is incorrect, right? I want the oldest comment first, and then I want the comments in the order in which they were posted. So the most recent comment should always be at the end, and then my form should be after the last one. So comments last if comments, if I have any comments, else there's no parent. This is something I want. Also, let's edit the model, and let's say that readable and writable. This should not be readable and writable. This should not be readable and writable. And the votes should not be readable and writable. And the votes should default to 0. Let's look at this again. Something is wrong. So the object exists cannot be redefined. My mistake. I'm setting default values for these fields, and this is not the proper way to set default values. This is the proper way to set default values. So table, field, default equal. Okay, so now I have all the comments, and I can post something else. Why was it not posted? Well, let's reload it. Now it's posted. Why it didn't appear soon? Well, it didn't appear soon because we processed the form after we list the comments. And this gives us a little bit of a problem because we need the last comment, so we need the comments first. But this is what we can do. Let's split this in two parts. First, we process the form, then we list all the comments. Now we want to refer the last comment. So how do we refer the last comment? We select them in reversed order, which is what we were doing before. We limit by the first, so we just get the first comment if there is one, and then we get the first. And so comment if there is such a comment, otherwise none, and actually it's already none if there isn't, so this makes things much easier. So this is what we do. When we view a post, we first get the ID from the URL, then we retrieve the post. If it doesn't exist, we go back to index. Then we retrieve the last comment, so the last one we created, so the first one in reverse chronological order. And then we take the first one selected, there is only one selected, or perhaps 0 if there are no comments at all. So if there is a comment, we get it. So this is either the last comment or it's none. And now we set the post default feed values. So the comment post default value is the ID of the current post. The parent of the comment we're going to create, the default, is this last comment or none. Then we process the form, and then we select all the comments, which will include the recently posted one. Again, let's try this. Let's post a new comment, and here we go. It thinks I'm unknown because I never actually logged in, which is the cause of all the trouble here, right? I should really log in. So let me log in, and I need to register. And now it should say me when I post a comment. Okay, now it says me, and I can click and I can see all the things I said, and actually this is only showing the posts but not the comments. We can add that.